Now, recently, well, just go back to the contender. After 8 years, it just couldn't sustain itself because we would have had to import boxes to keep it going. And when they did, the costing where that would be, it was prohibitive. And so they decided, like a sitcom in the United States, after 7 or 8 years, we'll pack this up and we'll go to something else. They did have fight nights, Renegade fight nights, a couple of years and last year back. And these are also very, very successful. But this year they're branching more into football. But they're still there beside us. And we know they're going to come back to help us considerably.
Well,
So, you know,
sorry, the years after the contender, yeah, it was a golden period for boxing. But then we've had a slump since. Based on the success of the contender and Ray Neville, is it that no other sponsor saw a void and saw the success and saw what Ray Neville was reaped to step in and fill the void? I mean, is it
well,
that
other
bad?
sponsors have spoken. No, other sponsors have spoken to us. But one thing, there are some sponsors who will show the sport that they deal with. And there are some sponsors who are not too keen on supporting boxing, at least in the way Reneville did. But I can tell you, we have some sponsors now who have come on board and are going to be assisting us. And our president told you the other day that one sponsor in particular is paying attention to the Stanley Couch Gym. And what the Stanley Couch Gym needs, Courtney, is millions of dollars to get that infrastructure back. Because it was in a state where it needed attention. But after the hurricane, it just went down. And one sponsor did make an effort to put some money in. But when we looked at it and what was actually needed, they had to go back to the drawing board. And there is something active where that is concerned now. And they are looking in their budget to see what they can do to get the sport moving.
Okay. All right.
And the main thing that we need, though, is we need promoters.
Right.
And promoters are not easy to find these days.
Well, on
And I
the
can tell you,
subject of promoters, one of the things that I've heard is that there would have been people who would have been willing to be promoters, who wanted to be promoters, but their interactions with the board turned them off from the sport.
I don't know what sort of interaction those could be. Because, we're always out there looking for somebody to work with. We have had a couple of promoters who have come in. I Fight, for example. They come in and they do a few things. And Tyler Buxton, who is in Canada, he has done a few fights here. And one of the things Tyler wanted to do was to nurture Jamaican fighters and to get a few fighters with Jamaican background into Jamaica. One of the fighters, for example, Ricardo Big 12 Brown, they were looking at him as somebody to build something around. But Big 12, he went up, I think it is to 12-0, and then he lost a fight. And that loss has set him back in a bad way. And, I spoke with him a couple of days ago, and he's having some challenges physically, which are being taken care of now. But once he's back in the ring and available, I think we're going to hear from him, and he will be one of the fighters that will be brought back to Jamaica to fight on one of our cards.
Okay. Let's now move to let's move forward, because the truth of the matter is that we can't stay stuck in the past. We have to move forward. There are two things I want to discuss. One of them is that you did say that you are now ready to step down. You found somebody who can fill that void, and that person you think is ready. So is this gonna be a case where you step away, retire, call it a day, go sit down on the beach under a coconut tree somewhere with drinking something, or are you gonna be more in an honorary situation where your 60 years of knowledge would still be a resource that the board can and whoever comes into boxing can draw on?
Courtney, as long as there's life in my body, boxing will have 60% of it.
60.
60%.
Okay.
I can tell you, I'm, you know, the sort of work behind, I do a lot of work behind the scenes. As I tell you now, we have a couple of boxers who I think can be world beaters. We have Sanjay Williams and Young Hilton. Those, I think, are the two most promising boxers that we have now. And I can tell you, I have been searching for a manager for those two boxers, the same way I searched for one for Nicholas Walters. I have had people who have made promises, but I can tell you, Courtney, but our promoters these days, they want to see something that is ironclad. That if they put their money in, there's something and some way that they can get something back. And I have been searching for a promoter for both Daniel Hilton and Sanjay Williams. And I'm not giving up hope. Those, I think, are two promising boxers who can be world champions. And I'm doing this quietly. And there's one promoter, I'm still nagging him because I would love him to take over Sanjay Williams. Sanjay Williams, another product of the Bruising Gym, and one who I've taken under my wing for years. A diligent young man, talented young man, who with the right attention could be a world champion. Same thing with Daniel Hilton. You know, Daniel Hilton has found a little niche recently, and there is a little group that is working with him. So hopefully that will work.
Okay.
But I can tell you, Courtney, boxing is in my bloodstream, and it will always be there.
Yeah. Tell me about some of your because I know mention has been made many a times from ever since I met you and even before about your international connections. That you're a man who was actually in demand all over the world wherever boxing is present. Tell us about your worldwide travels and involvement in the sport.
That's an interesting topic, Courtney. Sorry. You know, people in Jamaica are telling me that I should go. I think Carl said I should go and talking to my grandchildren and whatnot. I get invitations to travel the world. But one of the things I have to gauge myself now, traveling is not easy. Carl mentioned the other day that I was manager for the team to Mexico. Yes, we took 2 boxers in order to get them qualified, and the 2 boxers were qualified. I regard it as mission accomplished. That's something to be ashamed of. So, Carl, you're talking nonsense. Let's go back to some of my stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
I was the first Jamaican to be on the international role as an official. And this is way back many, many, many years. I was the first Jamaican to be an international technical official. Again, many years back. I was the first Jamaican to be elected on the onto an AIBA commission. The Rules Commission, which is one of the finest commissions in boxing. I was elected to that by the AIBA because they saw my worth and they knew my worth. I was elected to several positions throughout the Caribbean. I have been second vice president and first vice president in several international organizations. And I'm just mentioning these because you asked. Because many times people, say, Leroy, you should tell us more about yourself, but that is not me.
Hold
But
on, hold on,
when,
hold on,
you
hold
get
on, Mr. Brown.
criticism,
Hold on right here. Stop right there. Not go no further. At the top of the program, you were the one who spoke about giving people the flowers when they're alive in a boss. Don't forget that. Now, how can we give flowers when we don't even know, we don't know half of what of the service that you've given. So we might end up giving you one stalk of flower and you probably need 10 bunches. You know what I mean? So we think you should actually speak on these things so people do understand the vast of knowledge and the experience that that you've gathered over the years.
yes, and I try my best to pass on my knowledge as much as I can. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Because it rings another bell. Another thing Carl Grant mentioned was this trainer who he says know nothing about boxing. His name is Felipe Sanchez. Now, Felipe Sanchez is a Colombian Jamaican. He was born in Jamaica, middle class youngster. He went to Campion College, he went to university, and he's a banker. And do you know how Felipe Sanchez spends his evenings? His evenings at Olympic Gardens, at the gym, at the Sugar Olympic gym, coaching boxers. Not in New Kingston or elsewhere, drinking with his friends. In the inner city, coaching boxers. And I can tell you, he has been a tower of strength to boxing in Jamaica for the past about 5 years. And it is people like these who we need. And you see, Courtney, part of the problem again, is you have to love the thing and want to give back. And this is the way I have lived my life, because this is my little way of giving back. And as you say, it is occasion like this when I am almost forced to say something about myself. And I can tell you, my wife, Doreen, she was such a tower of strength. And I remember occasionally, she would say the same thing you're saying to me now. But basically, that's not me, Courtney. And it's only like when my hand is twisted like now, I will come out and say these things. There's one other little thing I should mention, though. I'm in the process of writing a book, and it will detail some of my travels over these past many years.
Okay, nice.
I'm at the stage now where I'm looking for.
Yeah, that sounds good. I like the sound of that. I do like the sound of that.
Yeah, we're at the stage now where I'm looking for. I'm speaking with a publisher, and I need some financing to help with it. So I'm working on that now, and that will tell a little bit, of the journey I've had. And I can tell you, Courtney, the journey, it has not always been smooth, but I never turn back, and I will keep going forward as long as I can.
All right. Now, speaking of going forward now, you just mentioned, people that the sport need to keep moving. I'll make mention, you'll see right here on the program, we have Coach Webb from Sentan. I recently spoke with Coach Graham in Mobe. Bright young minds in my opinion. And one of the things I noticed that is finally happening is that now we're getting boxing in schools. Talk to us now about are you excited to see this initiative finally taking off?
Extremely. Extremely. This is something, I pointed to the fact, let's take track and field and football. The schools are the nursery for these. And I've been saying for many, many years that we need to get boxing in the schools. And we're making an effort. I should say get it back in schools. Because I don't know if you know, Courtney, that we used to have intercollegiate boxing in schools.
Well,
but there was a certain headmaster who didn't like.
You see why we need. You see why we need to use your years of experience and educate the younger generation. Because most people don't know that. Because matter of fact, I remember back in the day when I promoted a couple of fights. I remember one day I was talking to a youngster, and I told him and I said boxing, and he said we do that in Jamaica. And I was like, no, when I was growing up, that was not the case, because you had your Lucian Chens and all of them. Thursday night at the fight, which I know Keith was very heavily involved with at the time, because I think he was on JBC at the time. So I remember all of that. But there are generations after would not have known all of this history. So, which is where we need people like you, to help us to understand where we're coming from as far as boxing is concerned.
Oh yes, boxing used to be good in the schools. St. George's, Bulmer's, JC, Monroe. Those are some of the schools that you had boxing in. And I would love to get it back there. But I can tell you this now, our president, this is one of his pet projects. And he's working very, very hard. And we have got very, very good response, especially in the rural areas. And we have some coaches, you mentioned Webb, for example. He's doing a good job. We have Graham, who is at the boxing gym in Montego Bay, which is one of the boxing board's gym. And she is doing a fine job out there. And, we have some sponsors out there who are taking care of certain things for us. So, right there is stuff that is going to happen, that is going to make a big breakthrough. And I can tell you, our president is really anxious to get this forward. And he's been doing a lot with it. And one of the partners we have with this is concerned is Jamaica Defense Force. They have been a powerhouse in boxing for years. And several of our coaches have come from the JDF. JDF, many people may not know, they have a boxing officer. And boxing, they have a lot of sports that they deal with. They are known in cricket and in football. They used to be known in hockey. And they are known in boxing. And there's a boxing powerhouse where that is concerned. And many of our people come from boxing. A former president, Colonel Ken Barnes, used to be in the Jamaica Defense Force. So, we have that thing with the Army, and they support it. And they have nights in the Army where they have boxing championships. So, they're getting another good source of boxing. And we have got boxers from the JDF who have done well as professionals. Not many, but a few. And we have a couple of trainers now. For example, Andre Reed, who is from the JDF. He's one of our top trainers. And he will be going with a boxer to the Commonwealth Games. And we had Gilbert Vaz. We had Graham. We had former general secretaries, Sutherland, for example.
And then there was
So the
Burton.
Army also made a terrific contribution.
Mm-hmm.
Burton, referee judge,
Bailey.
So many of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tremendous, So again, Carl Grant making, these negative remarks.
So
about
hold on,
the JDA.
hold on, Mr. Brown.
Really unfair.
Hold on. You're speaking
Yeah.
about coaches right now. Speak to us about the 3-star coach.
Glad you mentioned that. I am glad you mentioned that. I'm going to tell you, Courtney, definitively, if it was not for Leroy Brown, Carl Grant would not have been a 3-star official. Carl Grant, as I tell you, I have nurtured Carl Grant in many ways. So, when I hear Carl Grant saying all these negative stuff about me, I'm going to go to that 3-star thing. We heard of this 3-star examination that was being held. I did the paper. Carl Grant was interested. And I said, I'll work with you to go there. He got the paperwork. Now, since he was basically doing it on his own, I did the paperwork for him. I got him registered, and he had to find money to get himself there. I, Leroy Brown, contributed, and I'm going to say this publicly because of what some of the things that Carl Grant said. I contributed financially to getting Carl Grant to that venue to do that exam. So I did the paperwork for him and I assisted him financially. At the time, the way I did it, I said, all right, Carl, I will lend you the money. But like when you're dealing with your son, you tell him you're lending him the money, but you know you're not going to get it back. He never paid it back, and I didn't expect him to pay it back. But at the time that we were doing the thing, I said, okay, Carl, I will lend you the money. And I loaned him the money. But I wasn't expecting to be repaid, and I was never repaid. And if Carl Grant denies this, bring us together on this program. And I will call him a liar if he denies this.
You know,
and I can tell you the venue. Let me finish. There's a little bit more to it.
Okay.
Where we did this was what is the name of the hotel? The Olympia Crown Hotel. That was where we met the day when I handed over the money to him to assist him with paying for that trip to get his 3-star qualification. And I can tell you, I worked my show as an official to assist Carl to become a 3-star official. Not only that, he had a show up in Stonehill already, Stonehill, wherever it was. At the Stonehill School. He had a show there. I assisted him with the show. And not only that, I asked the ombudsman at the time, Mrs. Parchment, to come and make the presentation that night of the medals to the officials, to the boxers when they won, and to present Carl Grant's 3-star certificate to him. I'm so glad you brought that up. But Carl Grant will not tell anybody what I did to make him a 3-star general.
So what then?
But he will throw stones.
Yeah, but what then? Because I guess one of his grosses is that he never got to be national coach, travel with the team, and serve in the capacity of national coach. What would have happened then? With him now being a 3-star?
Well, let me tell you, this is the matter of national coach, you know. We have different coaches that we send to different venues. And Carl went with teams to different venues. I know of these. But there was one occasion when Carl Grant went with a team of boxers. I don't remember, it was 2 or 3 boxers. And one of the boxers didn't participate because he did not make the weight. Now, Carl Grant explained to me what happened, and I was a little bit understanding. But I can tell you, our president was not understanding where that was concerned. He took the line that a boxer should not lose his chance to perform on the scale. And he blamed the coach, who was Carl Grant. And I can tell you, the president held that against Carl Grant for a long time.
Oh, wow.
I tried to soften it a bit. You see, the president's opinion then, some will disagree, some will agree. I tend to be the softy, and I will say, okay, I understand what happened, but our president wasn't understanding, and I don't fault him for it. When you have a responsibility like that, you have to make sure that your boxer doesn't lose on the scale. And that is what happened. And I can tell you that drove a wedge between the president and Carl Grant. And I think today that wedge still exists.
Well, I guess
And I
that would
think
explain some of the some of the discord. But Mr. Brown, moving forward, again, we can't stay stuck in the past. It's about moving the sport forward.
absolutely,
Would it
absolutely.
would it be would do you think it would be beneficial to get all the people who say, hey, we all have a passion for the sport, we want the sport to move, especially the people who are not looking at it from a monetary standpoint, but those who want to, one, give back to the country, and just to use the sport as a vehicle to help youngsters to self-actualize? Would it be beneficial, Mr. Brown, to have some sort of a forum where everybody come together in a room? And if people need to shout and get angry, put on some gloves on them and who thump down who. And then when we finish, we clean up everybody and we sit down and say, let us smooth it out and come up with a plan that everybody can buy into so we can move the sport forward. Because constant bickering really doesn't get us anywhere.
It doesn't. And this is why many times I try to avoid the bickering. And what you're saying, Courtney, we're trying this, in little small groups. And we're trying to get people involved. And we do have some people who are showing interest in the sport. For example, our president, when he spoke with you the other day, he told you that Musson is giving some assistance where rejuvenating the Stanley Coach gym is concerned. But our first budget, it turned out to be terribly under budget. We need much, much more money. So, and we have a little group of people who are working behind the scenes. And I'm really, really hoping and be optimistic that something good. The unfortunate thing, when you get negatives don't help a sport. And this is why I avoid negatives as much as I can. I know some of what is being said, sometimes we ignore it. And the president and I discussed it many times. And I can tell you, the president and I, we have our fights,
Oh, he told me.
Because one of the things, for example, I play by the rule book. My president tends not to want to follow the rule book. And many times, this is where we quarrel. Because I say if there are rules, we must obey the rules.
Right.
And so, I tread the straight and narrow.
Does it make you a little bit too
90% of the time.
Does it make you a little bit too rigid where sometimes a little bit of flexibility could help?
I tell you what, there's sometimes this is the rule. And you can't be flexible with it. If the rule says this is how you do something. And that is part of the problem with me. First of all, it is an international rule. It says certain things must be done this way and in a certain way. For example, one of the important things in boxing is like in medicals. I insist on the medical rules. And many times when people say, Mr. Brown, I say, let me tell you this. When you see a boxer laying down unconscious for 10 minutes, and doctors working on him, and you're there saying a quiet prayer, you don't fool around.
Absolutely.
I have had two of those experiences. And this is why when it comes to safety and the medical rules particularly, I'm saying there's no way we're going to bend those. A boxer, where the weight is concerned, where the fitness is concerned and that kind of thing, I don't make any allowances where that is concerned. Where you can make allowances, I go ahead with it. but I always try to tread straight and narrow. That may be a
Absolutely.
fault. As I say, sometimes I will bend, but not when it comes to safety
Right,
and
right.
those rules. And I can tell you, Courtney, as I tell people, there's not one day I don't learn something new in boxing. Because I read and I read and I read, and there's hardly a day I don't go on the computer and check out something on boxing. It just comes to me automatically.
Right, right.
But getting people together, I think, is something worth the while, and it's something we're doing quietly. And we're getting people involved. And I can tell you the Army is one of the groups that is working with us. And we're getting into the inner city where you find the youngsters. We're getting into the schools where you find the youngsters. And I think there's a road ahead in a positive way. And Courtney, what I'm going to ask you, when the negatives come, ask some serious questions. Don't make something just fly by. Because some of the things I hear Carl Grant say on air, some of them are not directed at me, but at others, and I know the facts don't go so. So watch that as a journalist to another journalist.
Yeah. And that is
so,
why
be careful with that.
Yeah, that is why I believe in the full flow of information, and that, both side of the story is told, because how it is. They say that there's three sides of the story: your story, my story, and then there's a truth. And I'm one about the truth, but I'm also, especially for a sport like boxing that I love, and for the country, for my country that I love, I want to air all grouses, but also because I will tell you, I had a conversation recently with a couple of coaches, Coach Webb, Coach Graham, and what I hear coming out, Mr. Brown, is very encouraging. That here are people, younger people, who, when you ask them about some of the things of the past, they don't know nothing about it. They're not interested. They're just interested in how they can move forward and become the successes that they've seen in the past, that they've heard of in the past, right? But how 10 years from now, 15 years, 20 years from now, it's like how Stephen Francis has left an indelible legacy. When you speak to these people, this is what they're about. And I think we have to do everything we can to encourage it. So we hear the grouses, we get past them, because you can't solve problems without you knowing what the problems are. So once we hear them, we get past them, then we move. If we stay stuck and we're talking about the same thing next year and the year after, we would not have, we're like a dog chasing our tail, going around in circles. And that's what I think we need to avoid.
100%, Courtney, 100%. And as I tell you, I am not satisfied with what's going on. People in common board meetings, some of the stuff I tell in board meetings, I wouldn't put it outside, because I wouldn't want the public to hear. But I am not satisfied that after all my years, what is existing now, because it is not what it should be. But I know the problem. I know why some of it is happening. And my job, as much as I can, is to give back as much as I can. I tell you, Courtney, I love this sport. And one of the reasons is I have seen what it can do to help a youngster. And the two youngsters I have my eyes on now are Daniel Hilton and Sanjay Williams. And I'm trying my best to see if I can get promoters, managers, we take them under their wings. This I've done for years. And Mike McCollum, for example, I worked closely with Mike McCollum from he was a youngster until he became a world champion. I want to have more Mike McCollums and Nicholas Walters and Trevor Burbicks.
Right, right.
But cooperation is what we need.
Indeed.
And the bad mouthing, as little of that as possible.
Right, right. And also to ensure that things are being done properly and in the best interest of the sport. That too, because we know that while we know there's no such thing as a perfect administration, but if the administration is not operating at optimal, then the criticism should come, rightfully so. But again, there must be always corrective measures and dialogue, positive dialogue, not quarrel, but dialogue, so we can move forward.
Constructive criticism is what we need,
Right.
And I can tell you again, to go back to Doreen was one of my fiercest critics.
Mm.
And I can tell you, she made me a better administrator and a better man. Because I might have done something somewhere, and she said, Lee, you could have done this that way. And this is
Right.
where the wife. I
Right.
hear
Yeah.
Jones's wife being criticized. You know, Courtney, these are people who don't need boxing. They're giving their best for the sport without remuneration. As a matter of fact, contributing. So, you know, constructive criticism, I don't mind it. I accept constructive criticism, but not destructive criticism.
True. Agreed.
And criticism that's false.
Right.
The falsehoods, you know, that is the one that irks and hurts most,
Right.
you know. And as I said, you know, I have no hard feelings against Carl Grant, regardless of all the nonsense he's pouring out there, you know. And I wish that he would stop the nonsense he's doing out there. Because he used to contribute a lot to boxing, you know. And that is why I took him under my wings. I supported him the way I did. But Carl has this thing in him where, as I said, he had this rude boy thing, which is one of the things I tried to get out of him to a large extent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Carl is a great family man. You know, as I said, his young son, Carl Jr., was a favorite of mine.
Right.
And when he was leaving Jamaica, I missed him terribly.
Right.
Because he would have been he would be a world-class official one of these days.
Right.
And I would have assisted him in doing that.
And he's doing very well now. I can tell you that, doing
You know,
extremely well.
I remember Carl's little daughter. I remember when she would win our common entrance and that kind of thing. You know, the kind of rapport we used to have.
Mm-hmm.
And to listen to Carl now, you know, you don't believe what I'm hearing Carl saying now.
Mm.
You know, and these are the things, for example, that really hurt you.
Right.
When somebody you know you assisted, and he will go about and some of the things Carl is saying.
Yeah.
And not even just about me, what he's saying about our president.
Yeah. Well, if at all I can be peacemaker and I can help in any way, shape or form to make this thing, to smooth it over for the betterment of the sport, for the country, I'm willing to do so. So let's find a way to dialogue and get past this. We need to.
Courtney, I have an open mind, and this is how I operate. And, you know, as I said, my aim is to help the youngsters as much as I can. And that is what I do, and I will keep doing as long as I can.
All right. You know what, Mr. Brown, 60 years of contribution. We have to say that, you know, I want to say that, you know, we appreciate your service. Thank you for your service. And, you know, the fact that you said that you're stepping aside, but from the position, but not from the sport, you're there as a resource person for those who will call upon you. We want to thank you for that. And again, you know, hopefully we'll find a way that we can keep the sport moving forward so we can go from strength to strength by every punch.
I will never step away from the sport, Courtney.
Yeah. I mean, the position, the Gen Sec position, not the sport.
Oh yes.
Not the sport. I know you're not leaving the sport. You told me that about 20 years ago that for as long as you live, you'll be involved in boxing. And here you are telling me 20 years after. So I believe you.
And that hasn't changed.
I realize.
And my little bit that I give back to my boxers and my country. Mm-hmm. Oh, by the way, let me switch again. Another thing that I forget.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned tennis. And mentioned that I was kicked out of tennis. I spent many, many years in tennis. And at one stage, I was general secretary of both tennis and boxing. I served as general secretary of tennis for about 9 years. And then the pressure was too much. And I said, I'm not standing for re-election. And I can tell you to this day, I am an honorary life member of Tennis Jamaica. So, Carl, what you're saying again is nonsense. and stop telling people nonsense and stop casting aspersions on people who care about the sport, who love the sport, are doing their best for the sport as their little contribution to Jamaica.
All right, Mr. Brown, thank you. We got to run. We've been here for a minute. I mean, but of course, you're Leroy Brown. 60 years of experience. We could keep talking for another 6 hours if we had the time. But thanks again for reaching out. Thanks for talking to us. Thanks for for your contribution to the sport. And we keep the dialogue going. Again, for the betterment of the sport, for the betterment of the youth, and for self-actualization and all of that. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Appreciate you.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Just to get another youngster, save another youngster, that's the aim.
Yeah. I must mention that one of the things I've heard from some of the young coaches is that they have people in their gyms who are suicidal, and it's a sport that's actually helping them. That alone gives me a brand new energy to keep going.
A lot of people don't know this Courtney. And that youngster I told you about, that Mrs. Brown took on her wings. When I tell you he was depressed and dejected, and the difference becoming literate made to him.
Yeah.
So we do our part. And Courtney, thank you for your help too.
Of course.
And keep your eyes open.
Will do.
Keep your eyes open.
Will do.
And sometimes we hear the nonsense. Yeah. So good talking to you.
Yeah, man. Same here. Appreciate you. All right, Sir Brown.
Okay, my brother.
All right.
One love.
Blessings.